This episode is sponsored by the Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia. August's featured entertainment includes Low Cash on the 2nd, Dog Star on the 9th, and Fortune Feimster on the 10th. Details and tickets on HollywoodCasinoCharlestown.com. Must be 21 to enter the casino floor and attend a show. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Former Barenaked Ladies frontman Stephen Page rocks Rams Head in Annapolis, Maryland 1 week from today on Monday, August 12th. He joined me to discuss the band's biggest hits, from The Old Apartment to 1 Week, It's All Been Done to Pinch Me, as well as his favorite songs from his solo career since. Hey, Stephen Page. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP in Washington, D.C.
Thanks for having me on.
Everyone knows and loves your stuff from Barenaked Ladies, but so much solo work stuff since, and we'll probably hear a little of all of it, I'm guessing, at the Rams Head in Annapolis, Maryland on August 12th. So only a few more days to get your tickets, everybody. We're so excited to have you. Have you ever played Annapolis before? Do you know?
I've actually played that venue 2 or 3 times now. It's a great place to play. I love doing shows there. And for some reason, I have this weird thing where if I have dreams about having a gig, in my mind, I am imagining playing at the Rams Head in Annapolis. I have no idea why. I imagine walking down the street to that gig and then going into their kind of weird backstage area and then going out on stage and playing.
So you're not just saying that because that's the gig we're talking about. You literally, no matter where you're touring in the country or the world, you just think of walking into Annapolis?
Well, it's when I have a recurring dream. I'm not saying it's a good dream necessarily, but it's not necessarily a bad dream either. It's just it's the placeholder whenever I'm having dreams about playing gigs for some strange reason. But it's a good gig.
I, for some reason, think that's hilarious, but that's all right. That's good. There we go. So Maryland, Annapolis, the capital, the state capital of Maryland, is haunting your every waking moment.
That's right. I mean, I think that's maybe it goes back to Revolutionary War times. I have no idea.
That's great. Well, you'll have to tell that to our Governor Westmore or former Governor Larry Hogan if you ever bump into them on the political scene. You'll have to tell them about your Annapolis.
When I'm out on the stump doing the stump speeches in the coming months.
Yep. Yeah, on a stump like the Lorax is about all we'll do.
Yeah, that's where I live.
Not all the politicking will do. You speak for the trees. Yep. That's fantastic. All right. How about in terms of like the set list? Like obviously it's a cool intimate room and you're up close to the audience and all that. So I guess do you tailor the set list differently for something like that than when you do like say like a stadium show?
Yeah, I mean it's different. You know, we were lucky enough to do like I mostly play with it's the Stephen Page trio, and that's who's going to be at the Annapolis show with me. It's myself, Craig Northey from the band The Odds on guitar, and Kevin Fox on the cello. And we were lucky enough to be able to open for The Who about a year and a half ago on some of their arena shows. And at that point, you have like a 40 minutes. Yeah, it was amazing. It was a dream come true.
We just had Roger Daltrey on this same show like a month or two ago. When he
How was that?
Oh my God. Just, I mean, say no more, right? I mean, a legend.
Was he nice?
Oh, he was super nice, very forthcoming and talkative and great. Almost as talkative as you right now on the stump, but not quite.
Well, he was. I would see him in the hallway, and he'd kind of nod, and that was about it. But I think he was always trying to save his voice too. His voice was amazing. Like I can't believe this guy's like 80, and he sounds so good, like better than he did 20 years ago, even.
Was it a nod or was it more of a tilt, like a pinball wizard? Get it?
Oh, it could. Yes, it absolutely could have been that. Maybe the thing is that because he was deaf, dumb, and blind, and I always think that was just him playing a role, but backstage he actually is Tommy.
See, we're trading puns. Like the listeners are like, wait, what? How'd we get onto that? Oh, wait, who?
But, I was telling you about the set list. So
okay, you opened for them. Okay.
Yeah, so there you got to pack it with like the high energy songs and all the hits because you have no idea who's going to be at the show and whether they know who you are or not. So you kind of going to have to go, yeah, I'm that guy. And then with a show where it's like more of my audience, I guess, and it's we have a little more time to stretch out, and it is an intimate place. And the fact they have a nice little piano there at the Ram's Head. You can play a variety of stuff. I definitely play lots of stuff, deep cuts and hits from the Barenaked Ladies days, and then kind of a survey of my solo career as well. I always look at it as kind of a way to catch up with old friends. So you reminisce about the old days, and then you let people know where you're at now.
I love it. So it's going to be a little reminiscing and reminding them who you were with. Oh, I know that Bare Naked Lady song. Oh, I know that. I know that. It's a sneaky number of hits you'll know, folks. And then you also mix in all the solo stuff you've been doing in the whatever decades plus since then, 15
Yeah.
years, whatever you've been doing. So 14 you've been doing solo, but
It's like
uh
sneaking in the vegetables into your kid's meal.
I love it. They're like, "Oh, I want to eat ice cream of old apartment in 1 week." And then you're like,
That's right.
"Haha, I'm going to do some Stephen Page broccoli."
Yeah, and then eventually, so one of your weirdo kids goes, "I actually like broccoli," and then you
Yeah.
just start catering specifically to that kid's tastes.
I love it. Maybe they should serve broccoli there as a dinner, as part of the show.
Good idea.
Um, awesome. Well, that's a perfect, promotion for the actual show itself. But whenever I have someone on, I love to sort of paint your origin story, sort of
Mhm.
your journey, if you will. So I know you're born in 1970 in Scarborough, Ontario, Canada. Who was
Yep.
your before you formed Bare Naked Ladies, all that stuff? I'm talking like when you were a kid or a teenager, the formative years. Who were your touchstones, your favorite bands?
Well, I'm still Beatle obsessed. I have been since I was probably 7 years old.
Yeah.
So that's the most boring choice because it's everybody's in a certain way. But
It's a stereotype for a reason. They influence everybody.
exactly, that's true. And there's always more to discover
Yeah.
in all those tracks. I mean, I still find so much delight out of listening to Beatles stuff all the time. But as a teenager, I really, I was into, I mean, I loved the Smiths. I loved the Violent Femmes. I loved Billy Bragg. These are all artists who I still love.
Yeah.
They were the big ones for me. Anything with Paul Weller, so the Jam and the Style Council, um, were huge for me as well. And then my personal hero was this guy Stephen Duffy, Stephen Tintin Duffy, he was called at one point. Then he had a band called the Lilac Time, and he was my absolute favorite, still is. And the
You
difference
did
is
some
that
stuff with him, right? You
exactly
collaborate. Yeah.
we collaborate together. We've done some records together. We've written a bunch of songs, including ones like Jane and Call and Answer that were hits for Bare Naked Ladies. And then we did a record together called The Vanity Project 20 years ago. And now we're working on the follow up to that 20 years later.
I love it. I like how you dropped the name Stephen Duffy. I mean, you didn't even once mention Duran Duran.
Well,
Uh,
except he was never on any of the recordings, so he's kind of a mythical
oh.
figure in the Duran Duran world because he was the lead singer before Simon Le Bon.
So he was like a founding member.
Yeah, him and John Taylor and Nick Rhodes were the founders of that band.
Gotcha. But you made him famous.
That's right.
I love it. All right, well that's cool. So, all right, Beatles, Smith, Violent Fan. Okay, okay, I'm getting a sense of where you're coming from. Then, all right. So then, how do you the obligatory question then? So then, how do you actually meet Ed Robertson to form Bare Naked Ladies in what '88? How does that actually come together?
Well, we knew each other from elementary school, even. We were a grade apart. So when I was in fifth grade, he was in fourth and so on. But he always scared the crap out of me because I thought he was like a tough guy. And I was a total softy. And he just seemed, he would wear like a Rush t-shirt, something like a rock band, as opposed to me with my Bee Gees t-shirt. Um, and but then when I was in high school, I saw his band play. They were a cover band, and they did like all those, they did Rush and rock stuff that you might expect. But then they also did Talking Heads and Peter Gabriel, and I was like, oh, this guy has some taste in common with me. And I had made a tape with another friend of songs that we'd made up together under the name Scary Movie Breakfast. And we were just goofs, making just, you know, silly kind of folk punk music. And Ed had heard this and came up to me at this camp we were working at, singing one of these songs. Of course, I was very flattered, but also we started singing together, and it was like kind of meant to be. Like right away, our voices just blended really well, and we enjoyed hanging out together. And before we knew it, we were in this band that we really didn't consider a real band. It was kind of like almost a joke, like we was kind of like a quote unquote band. And until we started doing shows and then realized there was no turning back.
I love it. And so I guess you all sort of put out a cassette tape, a self-titled because there you go. There you
Yep.
go, young listeners. This is pre-CDs even. I remember the
Hmm.
cassette tape days. I love it. Even when you'd pull the little magnetized tape out and wind it around on your fingers if it got
That's
caught.
right.
I love it. All right, but really the breakthrough was Gordon the second one with you signed with Reprise Records, and
Mhm.
if I had $1 million, and Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys legend salute. How did you actually sign with them? Like how did that actual, signing in that Gordon take off? Because at that point, that's what put you guys on the map.
Sure. Yeah, we had this cassette, this 5 song cassette that we'd made, and we were distributing ourselves, and it became oddly huge in Canada. It went gold in Canada, which had never happened with a cassette or an independent cassette or anything like that. And we were just selling them off the stage at our shows, and record stores started asking for copies of it. And it kind of went nuts. So because of this, people started talking about our band, and we had been turned down by every label in Canada. And a couple different people played our tape for Seymour Stein at Sire Records.
Mm.
And Seymour is the guy who signed the Ramones and the Talking Heads and Madonna and Katie Lang and one of the most important record guys in history. And he heard this thing. I mean, I grew up listening to so many Sire records and watching that logo spinning around on my turntable. And they came to us and offered to sign us. And we had a record already made that we hadn't put out yet. And so we essentially just handed that over to them, and they gave us free reign. They were so good to us that just let us kind of make the record we wanted to do.
So it was
And at
already
that
ready to
point,
go, kind of. It was
that's
already
right.
ready. Yeah.
Yeah, it was ready to go, and it was huge in Canada and not huge at all in the United States. And it took us a long time of building that audience, year album after album after album. But because we had some of that Canadian success, we never got dropped by our label. In fact, they just kind of kept putting out records. So by our fourth album, we had kind of primed everything for this huge hit that the Stunt album became, because we had built up these kind of individual audiences around the United States.
Awesome. Thanks for all that early band history. I love it. And before we get to the Stunt album that you mentioned, I would like to at least back it up and let's do a couple deep dives if you have a second on some of the songs that we might hear, the Barenaked Ladies ones. Then we'll finish with some of the solo stuff, wrap it back around. But I
Sure.
wanted to know about the Old Apartment, which was on the Born on a Pirate Ship album.
Correct.
Well, I guess you had Shoebox on there, and that was
Yep.
also on the Friends soundtrack, etc. And gosh, even before that, we jumped over Jane and some of those other songs. But we don't have time for all of them. But tell me about Old Apartment, because I guarantee our listeners, even if you think you don't remember the song, as soon as they launch into it, you're gonna know it. And that this is where we used to live. I wanted to ask you about. It's sort of you sort of geniusly flip our expectations. And shout out to my wife for pointing this out to me. But it sort of almost seems like, oh, this is almost like a Toby Keith, who's that man living my life, like, or our Old Apartment is, oh, it's a breakup song, and then you flip it at the end. Oh, we just got we've another place or something. Tell me about
That's
the
right.
idea of flipping it. That's genius.
Well, because I mean, that I had been in this apartment in Toronto. It was a third floor walk up, and it wasn't a great place. But you realize when you move out of it into maybe a better place, as you've stepped up somehow in life, and we were able to this. You can tell that this is from the '90s, because I talk about being able to buy a house, which of course nobody in their 20s or 30s can do anymore.
Nope.
But it's a bit of a souvenir of the olden days. But
Zillow, max price, can't afford anything.
that's right. It's just gone. It's just, yeah. Sorry. Try expand your search. Um, but back then that was it. But you look back at these times, even though they may be difficult times, that still they are important memories. And I had gotten calls from my old landlord that they had mail for me that was showing up, and I thought, I don't know if I even want to go and pick it up, because there's gonna be somebody else's furniture. I'm gonna have to see that, and have to like see that the very vague remnants left of my imprint there and
Yeah.
somebody else's, and that's more what the song is about than anything else.
but it's a brilliant storytelling,
Thank you.
visual storytelling, and flip our expectations by the end. It's great. All right, and then of course to the stunt album, the real blow up one that you mentioned, that
Sure.
went I don't know, platinum or whatever. I mean, it was huge. And mostly, off the strength of well, we got to talk about 1 week. I mean, you probably have done it to death in interviews, but it's gonna allow me to play the soundbite on the radio, baby. So I gotta get a but yeah, talk about it. It is it's like such of a wonderfully weird song. It's rapid fire. There's like so many cool turns of phrases that are still stuck in our head to this day, like Harrison Ford, I'm getting frantic. There's little catchphrases all throughout this thing. How'd you come up with it? Because it is a unique beast of a song, baby.
Well, I mean, it came up as we didn't expect as we were putting it together for it to be, a huge number one hit single. We thought it was like kind of a fun album track palette cleanser, that was kind of rooted in what we would do in our live show. And I think that's why it connected, because it had the authenticity of our live show. We had this idea of a song about an argument between a couple and how long people hold on to it before they are willing to kind of re-enter into a conversation with their partner again. But these in between sections, which I guess are verses, were these raps, and Ed had written these kind of very ornate, like continuing the story through these kind of I would say kind of like almost like a Jamaican toasting kind of rap. And because that's the kind of thing we would do in our live shows. They were always improv, and really it was to kind of try to make each other laugh. So I suggested, why don't you go home tonight and just like improv a bunch of raps instead of trying to make it really tightly constructed. And he did that and came back to me the next day. We've been writing the album together with all of these hilarious improv raps that he just done. He had like a video camera and just wrapped it into the cameras. And that's what kind of retained the spirit of the Barenaked Ladies live shows. And I think that's what made this song feel so unique. And also because we didn't have expectations for it. We knew it was weird. And I think it's funny that the song became so commercially successful. And in some people's minds, people who didn't like the song or got sick of it, it was like as if it was so mainstream in its normalcy. And I still hear it and think that's a weird track. I love it.
It's such a good point because, stylistically, it's so bizarre and weird, and you wouldn't think it's a hit, and yet it became commercial and mainstream. Maybe because you're dropping pop culture, watching X-Files, Kurosawa, Samurais. I don't know. Maybe you're stringing together mainstream things in a bizarre packaging, and somehow it works.
Yes.
But it's great. And I'm actually surprised as I was researching here that obviously 1 week was the big number one hit here in the States, but I'm surprised that it's all been done. It's all been done. Everyone knows that one. I think that was bigger. I think that topped the charts bigger in Canada. Why do you think that is?
Well, initially that was the one we thought was going to be the first single. I mean, I think we went into that record thinking, well, that's going to be the first single, and that will be the hit. And then 1 week became kind of the dark horse. But I think what happened was in Canada, where Canadians are super judgmental of their own people, and they kind of like get suspicious of anybody who makes it in the US. So I think they were taken by surprise. I think Canadian radio and Much Music, which was like their version of MTV, were kind of taken by surprise by our success, because we had built up, like I was saying, these pockets of diehard audiences across the US. So it wasn't on the cover of Rolling Stone where everybody could see it, but we were starting to play arenas and stuff elsewhere. So when we showed up with this big hit, Canadian radio had kind of sworn off us. They thought we were over. By the time after The Old Apartment, we were really struggling kind of connect with Canadian audiences. They felt like they had seen us enough times, maybe. And it's a smaller place, right? You can only play each city so many times on an album cycle before they're kind of burnt out on you.
And Canada was becoming this is where you used to live, but
that's not, right.
It was the equivalent of Your Old Apartment at that.
Exactly. So then when 1 week took off, I think they were taken by surprise. So I think they were trying to play catch up by the time by the time It's All Been Done came out. But the interesting little thing I like is that the song American Woman by the Guess Who
Of course.
that Lenny Kravitz also covered.
Yeah, it's great.
But that's another Canadian song that was number one in the US and not in Canada. It was like number two in Canada, same as 1 week. So that was like you know, a little bit of poetic justice there too.
Oh,
Because I
I
think,
like
it's like
that.
that's a classic song.
It truly is. It truly is. And not many. We had, what was it, Randy Bachman on. A lot of people forget he was part of that guitar on the Guess Who stuff
Oh yeah,
before
he wrote that song.
before BTO. Yeah, that's
Yep.
awesome. So check that out in the archives, folks. Uh, but all right, maybe time for one more Barenaked Ladies before we bring back to the solo stuff. But tell me about Pinch Me, because again, folks, it's one of those that maybe what are we at? 14 years after that song came out, you might not
Mhm.
recognize it by the title, but as soon as you launch into it, they're gonna know it. Tell me the idea to sort of do, how, I guess, a little slower paced verses and then suddenly a rapid fire chorus. That sort of stands out to me in that.
Right. It's kind of a song about. I like the idea that it was a song that had similar elements people were used to from 1 week, but and it has the kind of the has some jokes in it, and that I think are pretty good jokes. But it's really a song about depression. I like that's to me that kind of sucker punch
Yeah.
is kind of my favorite kind of way to work, where you have these songs about dark things and can somehow make them feel uh um light in a way, or make them um uh perhaps fool you into thinking there's something different.
Yeah. And so instead of pinch me, it's punch me. It's sucker
Yeah.
punch. Thank,
Right.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. All right, cool. Well, I mean, you've been generous with your time on all of those, but I'm gonna give you a chance to plug some of the solo. So they're in here, all of those famous Barenaked Lady songs that we just mentioned, and many more throughout the set in Annapolis. I guess you left in what, 2009, Barenaked
That's
Ladies?
right. Yep.
Yeah. Why did you leave, by the way? Let's ask that real quick, and then I want to ask you about some of your favorite solo ones that you can't miss in your show. But yeah, but first, why did you break off? Just time?
It was 20 years in the same group. And when you start a group when you're 18 with the same guys, and then you're like now all of a sudden almost 40, and you're different people and you have different goals, and it just wasn't really working anymore for us, that was painful. I thought I was going to be in that group forever,
Yeah.
and when I wasn't in that group forever anymore, it took me a while to kind of figure out who I was and what my goals were.
Yeah.
But it's been 15 years since I left now, and it's like, now I'm at a point where I can look back with a lot of great memories, but
Yeah.
really happy with where I've taken my career, as far as like the kinds of choices I've been able to make musically and the kinds of people I get to work with.
Again, I'm doing the same analogy as I just did, but that is the band Barenaked Ladies is now your old apartment. That is
I
where you're
guess you're
still.
right. I guess you're right. Yeah.
It's a recurring theme here. And they're still touring too. I think I saw them open for Hootie or something a couple years ago
That's
in
right.
Merriweather, but they're doing their thing and you're doing your thing. All right. So speaking of which, bringing it full circle, what sort of solo tunes of yours from? Well, I guess you'd done Vanity Project and Singer Must Die sort of concurrently with Barenaked before you left, but
Mm-hmm.
then your first real solo was Page One in 2010. Then you had
Yep.
the Heal Thyself two-parter, Instinct and Discipline in 2016 and 18, and most recently Excelsior in 2022.
Yeah.
Post, or maybe we'll still say during pandemic. But anyway, yeah. So from all of that, what are some of your personal favorite solo ones that you want to invite our listeners to go check out if they only know your Barenaked Lady stuff? What are some of the solo stuff that you're really, really proud of that you want to turn them on to?
Well, I think if you were to listen on the most recent record on Excelsior, there's the song "The Golden Age of Doubling Down." Is I think goes along very well with what people may remember from my Barenaked Ladies time. I'm really proud of it. It's the style of music I like to listen to as well as I like to make. So I highly recommended. I would also recommend "No Song Left to Save Me," which is kind of a Motown inspired song from 2 records ago.
Nice.
And what else is there? It's good. Oh, a New Shore from Page One is one that I think both myself and the audience tend to really enjoy. We do it every show. And yeah, there's a bunch there. Man Child is a great one.
I love it. So you'll sprinkle all of those in at a
Oh
time.
yeah. Oh
Awesome.
yeah.
And real quick, so when you said the golden age of doubling down, is that a comment on where we are in society, politicians and otherwise, where they just
Oh,
don't admit
100%.
wrong and they're just like, no, if I double and triple and quadruple down, people will eventually, I guess, just move on to the next thing in the news cycle. But I think it's kind of a sickness we have right now.
Yeah, it's absolutely a sickness, and it means we can't, like, we would rather as a society be cruel to each other than admit that we have things we can learn from each other. And
Right.
that's it's gross. I don't like it. But and people are so mean to each other all the time. That
Better to admit the flaws, human frailty, and do sort of a mea culpa and learn from it and grow, rather than no, cross your arms. That's where we're at.
exactly, and it just separates us from each other.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for putting it all into a song like you have been doing for years.
Been trying.
I guess final seconds beyond the music, television. I know Get in Line music video had some King of the Hill.
Mhm.
You also did the theme for Big Bang Theory.
Correct.
Do you A, how fun was it doing stuff like Big Bang, etc. And B, do you have like a whole generation now that kind of just knows your voice from like, from Bazinga?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's absolutely people who like probably didn't even know who we were except for that one song. So I mean that's been a huge thing for us. And I mean, as far as like movie stuff, I remember we did a song for the Disney Chicken Little movie, and
Oh
they
yeah.
actually like recorded it while watching the opening footage and so on. It was like with the Disney producers there. That was pretty cool. And then you have a generation of people who are now in their 20s who grew up watching that movie, who like that was their way into the band.
I love it. Well, hopefully this guy won't fall Chicken Little at Annapolis. Our whole universe is in a hot, dense state, so maybe it will. Who knows? But
Yes, good point.
but we're glad that every waking moment you're thinking of walking into the Ram's Head of Annapolis.
Yep.
I love that. That's apparently that follows you around. That's great. Hey, you've been so generous, Stephen Page. Everybody has to check him out, and I guess it's called your trio, Stephen Page Trio.
You got it.
Going to be at Rams Head Annapolis, August 12th. Get your tickets. Thanks so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.